people, now we're entering part 2 of this video, which is about building your team for your NFT project or your Web3 business. And we have Maddy from Angel Alliance to share her experience with us. Maddy is basically the founder of Angel Alliance NFT project. It is a very, very amazing project that inspires and invests into female entrepreneurs. So hello, Maddy. So nice to have you here. And I would love, and I would love to have you introduce a little bit about what Angel Alliance is.
Of course, and thank you so much for having me here. This is such an incredible series and I'm so excited to be here. Very, very quick introduction of myself. My background is I started a fitness business and then went into venture capital, noticed the lack of female representation and the huge funding gap that exists, and it made me want to do something about it. Found Web3, and then you go down this rabbit hole, absolutely loved it. And that's how I kind of came up with creating Angel Alliance, and it's an initiative to help female entrepreneurs on a global scale by providing them with funding, connections, resources, and everything like that. We host a lot of events, we are building up an Angel Alliance portal, and yeah, we have an incredible community. So excited to be here. Thank you so much.
Very excited to have you. And if I may add, Maddy is actually 20 years old. I was actually very, positively surprised when I first learned about that, because you're just so ahead of your time. So maybe in the future, I would love to have you just talk a little bit about, your personal background, also your fitness business and how it led all the way to Angel Alliance. But today we're going to focus on the point of establishing a team. So Angel Alliance, from what I'm seeing, looks like a well-oiled machine. And I would love to start with a question. How many people are in the team of Angel Alliance?
Yeah, so it's we have 6 people within the core team, and Angel Alliance actually has council members as well because we are a decentralized autonomous organization, which essentially means that the community is trying to, run itself in a way. And when you have that, you need like a center of people that are just helping manage everyone. So within the core Angel Alliance team, we have 6 people, and then within the council, we have around 10 people.
So 16 people in total.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
I would love to have a brief overview of what do these people exactly do, especially within the 6 people core team.
So we have someone for marketing. Fortunately, marketing is not my expertise, and it's so critical, especially when you're building up a project and having a diverse marketing strategy, and just having someone that's really creative in that sense and is really good at coming up with content is incredibly useful. We also have someone for partnerships, and I guess this kind of splits into 2. We have someone that's for partnerships in terms of like venture capital firms and incubator firms, and then we have someone partnerships for Web3 and like NFT projects. So that's incredibly useful because you probably also get this where you get so many projects messaging you asking to collab, and it can sometimes be really difficult to keep up with them all. So partnerships is another big one. We also have a head of council within our team, which is probably more individual to Angel Alliance, but they just help manage the whole council team. So the 10 individuals, then they help me manage them. We also have, I also want to say like a COO who kind of helps me out on everyday business things, and it's he's one of our co-founders, so he's been incredible, and a developer as well. Definitely need one of those, especially in the NFT space. But I think those are the main roles, and as well community, so someone just really helping to manage the community, running community events, understanding what the community want, because I think that's another big mistake that people make, is not listening enough. So we have someone there for that as well.
I think it's very interesting to see, what makes up a Web3 team, because I remember when people were going into Web2, the whole construct is a bit different from traditional business in the sense that, okay, maybe much more has to go into marketing, on social media platforms and so on. And now that we're moving into Web3, there are also a lot of different concepts that come into play. And as you said, for example, really listening to the community, because community is a big part of Web3. So thank you so much for that introduction. And I think this brings us to the next question, and that is, how did you find this group of people? Because Web3, from what we are all saying, it's still relatively new, and therefore I think it's very hard to be able to find the group of people who, first of all, believes in Web3, but then also is interested enough to really understand what it is to be able to do their job well.
100%. And I think this is a question that I get asked a lot, like how do you expand your team and how do you hire in Web3, I think is another big question. In terms of how our team first kind of got put together, I actually knew one of my co-founders beforehand, and we were kind of both into NFTs. He's a lot more into DeFi and things like that, so I'm learning from him every day. But I essentially pitched this idea of what I wanted to build, and like they were so on board, and our team grew very organically from that point. And it's just been people that have shown interest in the projects, which is incredibly powerful to see. And I would say most of the team it was just through them organically showing interest, reaching out to us, asking to be a part of the team, which is absolutely incredible. And I think this is how most teams in Web3 grow, which is really positive to see, because it's less about like your CV and the experience that you have, and it's more about how much passion do you actually show for the project. And I think for me, that is something that I really look for, because like, again, I'm quite young, and in a traditional, I guess, CV world, people would probably look at that and question it. But that is why I'm trying to deconstruct this whole hiring system, because I have been on the end where I get so many rejections, and I completely understand what that feels like, and it kind of demotivates you a bit. So I'm trying to make it more about you as an individual. What are you passionate about? Are you going to care about this project? And I think that's the metric that should obviously be more taken into account. And obviously you do have to take the skills of certain people into account when putting them in certain positions. But I just think showing an interest goes a long way, and that's how we've grown.
Yeah, that is actually very interesting, but also very consistent in the sense that Web3 is a lot about building virtual communities, and to also service that virtual communities, we oftentimes build virtual teams, and these people are just found through virtual events or virtual setups, and I guess that's how things go moving forward. And yeah, I do love what you said about you care more about the individual as opposed to, the ton of experiences they have behind them. Because what is very important is Web3 is so new. NFTs have been around for a couple of years, but I think they've really, really taken off only last year. So if you want someone with 3+ years of NFT programming experience or art generation experience, most likely you're not going to find them. So it's very important, I guess, to really find the individuals who are keen, or first of all are competent, but are keen on figuring things out.
I couldn't agree more with that statement.
Yes, and I just touched on, global teams, virtual teams. The community is global. I mean, the Web3 space, I think it's nonstop, which makes life a little bit stressful sometimes. There's always something going on around the clock. But what I would love to ask you is, how do you manage your team across different time zones? Because I understand that your team you are based in the UK, right? But I don't think your whole team is in the UK.
No. I think the NFT space still revolves around US time zones a lot. So you have to adapt a little bit if you're in Europe. But in terms of the team, we are kind of everywhere, which makes it even harder. We've got Australia, we've got US, we've got Europe, which does make it a bit harder to manage everyone. But I think there are 2 key bits of advice that I would give. Number 1, when it comes to trying to arrange meetings, select a few different times and let the team members vote on it as well, and make sure to record all meetings, because there are going to be times where one person can't join, but just keep it an open discussion in terms of trying to set a meeting, because it can be quite hard sometimes, and you even have to break them up, which is what I found. And then the second thing is using a team management software, and I use Notion. My team, I don't know how much they like Notion. I think they always say it's more for my benefit, but we have essentially like there's a part in the Notion where it just has everyone's core tasks. So everyone always knows what they should be doing that week, and there's access to the weekly goals and everything like that. So everyone is essentially on the same page. And it has been an absolute lifesaver, because if you don't have that centralized document or whatever it is, everyone gets confused, no one knows what they're doing, and if you're in different time zones, you're going to always miss each other. And yeah, my team, I don't know how much they like Notion, I feel, but it's hard to find a software that everyone likes. I know that there's Asana out there as well. But yeah, finding that software and keeping meetings an open discussion, and especially with the core team, I actually have like one-to-one chats with them once a week individually, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. And I think that can be really useful because you can go around the time zones as well with that.
That is excellent advice. I think, on one hand, having the right mentality, the right soft skills to manage a team or a global team is important. But like choosing the right tools to support you, I think is not talked about enough. You said it's called Notion. So I'm gonna have a look at that because I've never used that before. I'm gonna plop the logo on the screen for anyone who's interested. But yeah, I think that's so important, just avoid having separate Google Sheets and things written down on Post-its and so on. I think that will make it very chaotic for everyone. If there are a few centralized tools that everyone can refer to, everyone can use and help them structure themselves, I think that will make things a lot easier. So it's great that you made your team use Notion, and I'm sure that has helped everyone be organized.
I hope so.
So, with COVID hitting, everyone going into home office, one of the big questions is how to keep everyone motivated. Now, fast forwarding into Web3, it's kind of a given that everyone's kind of working remotely. How do you, for Angel Alliance in particular, keep your team motivated?
Yeah, so I think this is a really good question to ask, and I think for me, I think like setting tasks and understanding what the team are doing should be a very open conversation, because I think the mistake that a lot of leaders make is they give people tasks and then that's it, and they don't ask them, is this okay? Does this suit your schedule? All of these kinds of questions. And I think that is probably one of the biggest mistakes, because people won't want to do it. If they don't actually enjoy it, people won't want to do it, and you won't get anywhere. So I think number one thing, keeping it really open discussion. And I always say this, I always ask for feedback on like when I'm saying tasks, just to make sure that everyone is on the same page, because like a lot of my core team also have full-time jobs as well as doing this, and that is very, very common in the NFT space. And you also have to be aware of that, and you have to be conscious of that, because if you pile up so much work, then it's just going to stress them out even more. So I think being aware and keeping a very open discussion is critical. I also think this is where psychology in a sense comes in, but understanding what people enjoy doing and what they're good at and what they don't enjoy doing and what they're bad at is really imperative when setting tasks and keeping people motivated. Because if you give someone something that they enjoy doing, I can guarantee you the work's going to be a lot better. Whereas if you give someone like a task that they hate doing, it's going to be a bit harder to motivate them, to get them to do that thing. But also just keeping team morale. And I think especially as a leader, it is, I guess, your responsibility in a sense to make sure that that team morale is always kept up. So even if like you're not having the best day, anything like that, you always have to try and keep that positivity going and keep that motivation going, because if you as a leader kind of start to fall apart, then it's like the whole team will as well. So as a leader, you always have to be there and support your team essentially, and really guide them in that sense, and making sure that everything is a very open discussion and everyone feels like their voice is heard in a sense. I think those are like key top tips. And I'm actually reading a book at the moment called How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is another great book, and it's really all about showing appreciation and not shouting at people when something goes wrong. And it's just, I think that's another great tip.
That's excellent. I think I also heard something along the lines of you should not try to be a boss or a dictator, but really be a leader and run with your people. So I think that's a great tip. Kind of along those lines of, you being the leader, do you ever feel that you are the bottleneck at times for your project?
Yeah, I think sometimes as a leader, especially in the NFT space, there is a lot to take on, especially when a lot of your team can be part-time. And I mean, I am full-time on this project, and I know that is an absolute luxury, and I'm very grateful that I have the opportunity to do that. But yes, I think there's a lot of moving parts, and I think this goes with being a leader in any case. You have to have so many different hats, and you have to manage the team, then you have to be on Twitch Spaces, and then you have to present at events, and you have to make sure the marketing is done, and the list goes on forever. It can get quite overwhelming sometimes, but I'm going to go back to Notion. I have a daily to-do list on Notion, and so when I wake up first thing in the morning, I already know what's first on my list, I know what's second, I know what's third. And I find that really helps me structure myself, because otherwise you wander into a day and you don't really know what to do. But yeah, I think sometimes it can get quite hard to balance it all. And I mean, sometimes I do multitask in Spaces, I'm not going to lie, as I'm sure most of us do, because to try and keep up the workload of everything. But yeah, I think you have to find that balance, and it's hard because society then also tells you, oh, you need to take breaks, you need to do this, and it's like there's so many, I guess, standards that you have to be aligned with, I think is the right word, and it can be hard, but I think prioritization is key in this sense, understanding where you need to be, and then reflection, taking the time to reflect. Is this, I don't know whether it's a Twitch space, is this Twitch space bringing the most value? Or, is this certain task that I'm doing every day, is that bringing value, whether it's to the community, to the brand? And it's just about continually reflecting and being very self-aware of everything that's going on around you, and making sure that the team also understands their roles and their tasks, and making sure that everyone is doing their bit as well. But yeah, it can be a bit overwhelming sometimes, especially in this NFT space, because it quite literally doesn't sleep. But yeah, make sure to take some time for yourself and just continually reflect and ask yourself the question, is this bringing value? And then assign, I guess, the priority of tasks like that.
Absolutely. I have the feeling that a lot of the female founders in this space are not sleeping enough. And while I think it's absolutely necessary, for example, if it's leading up to the mint, leading up to a big announcement or launch, that some sacrifices are made for the better of the business, because we are building a business. In the grand scheme of things, as you said, it's still very important to maintain that balance. And what really helped me is kind of a mentality switch, in the sense that, okay, what I'm building here, it's not going to be a sprint. It's gonna be a marathon. So I'm gonna have to pace myself very well. I'm gonna have to, as you said, take a step back, reflect on what I'm doing. Is that something effective? And also, is that something that is scalable? Can I build upon that to really guide the decision making and just not burn yourself out? So thank you very much for all of those tips. I would like to move on to a slightly more tricky topic, and I guess a topic where everyone is wondering a bit and a bit lost about, and that is how to decide on compensation for a Web3 team. So for a traditional world, or even for Web2 jobs, oftentimes we can refer to websites such as Glassdoor as to how much the pay is, but in Web3 it's a bit up in the air. So we'd love to hear about your experiences as to how that discussion goes.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think there are different ways to compensate a team in Web3, especially in an NFT project. I think there's either taking some sort of percentage for the initial mint, or you take percentage of the initial mint and make sure that it's kind of guaranteed for salaries down the line, or there's also royalties. And I agree, I think there's so many question marks around this, and it's such a new industry, no one knows what the standard pay is. And I think especially with a lot of these NFT projects, they are startups. And that is the way that we should be looking at them, because there are so many different parts of the equation. It's not just marketing, there's also development, and there's just so much. And I think when you look at a startup, that is the best kind of comparison, I guess, to like a Web 2 sense as to what people are earning and how things are being distributed. Because again, it's very, very new, and there isn't that much information out there. And I think that a similar thing can be said for a startup, because when you've just joined a startup, it can be hard to know what like the salary requirement should be, because it's a new environment. And I hope that slowly but surely, maybe we'll get like a Web3 Glassdoor where people can like add in their salaries and things like this. But I agree, I think there's still so much confusion around it, but there's different ways to be compensated within the space, and just being aware of that. And yeah, maybe we should start work on the Web3 Glassdoor. But yeah, I think there is no set salary, and it's going to vary. It's going to depend so much on the project. What stage is the project at? Can they afford to compensate you? And it's the same way you look at a startup. Like, what stage is a startup at? Can they afford to pay you? Because when you look at when a startup begins, they start with no money, or a lot of the time they start with no money. So just being aware of those different factors and dynamics, and just kind of making decisions based off of that.
Absolutely. And I think a big part of it is, do you believe, you as a team member entering project, do you believe in that project? Do you want to take the leap of faith and really put effort in with a delayed compensation, but possibly a good one, to really join that project and help build that project and, be a little part of history, essentially. So yeah, absolutely treating it as a startup, which I believe leads us to our final question, and that is, if you were to give one advice to a founder who is looking to gather his or her team for an NFT project or a Web3 project, what would that advice be?
One piece of advice. Wow. My number one piece of advice would be expand your team. I know that it can be so easy to get caught up in the trap of like, oh, I can do everything, like I'm going to take it all on myself. No one should take on the responsibility of launching a project all by themselves, because it's an incredibly hard task to do, especially if you also have a full-time job or part-time job or whatever it is. Like, don't be scared to expand the team, and you have to sometimes be willing to delegate responsibilities, because a business isn't going to scale with just one person. And I think this is, again, I'm going to say this again, but like startups across the board, that's a common theme where people are scared to like delegate responsibilities. And a startup can't grow with just one person. You need to take more people on. So that is my one piece of advice.
Thank you so much. I think this was a very, very fruitful discussion. I'm sure the audience has learned a lot from this. So thank you, Maddy, so much for sharing with us. I will put all of the information as well as links regarding Angel Alliance down in the description. We will be doing a separate Angel Alliance interview. So once that is out, I will also put that down in the description so you can have a look at that. And yeah, thank you so much for being on the show, Maddy.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope it does help anyone. And my DMs are always open. Feel free to message me at any point if you have any questions. More than happy to help.
Excellent. So thank you again for watching, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.